She didn't scream. She'd been trained not to, and that training was the only reason she was still breathing 30 seconds later. Caroline counted her steps without meaning to, a habit drilled into her since she was 12, back when her father's security detail still walked her to school. Footsteps behind her matched her pace exactly. Too exactly. She picked up speed past the turnstile at West 4th, phone gripped tight, thumb already finding Vivian's name. The man behind her didn't call out, didn't grab her, just stayed close enough that she could hear him breathing through his mouth. She turned onto a side street that suddenly felt too empty, one streetlight buzzing weak in orange over a shuttered bodega. And that was her mistake. He caught her wrist. "Let go of her." The voice came from behind them both, unhurried, almost bored. Caroline turned. A man stood a few feet off, hands in the pockets of a dark overcoat, watching the stranger gripping her wrist with an expression so calm it was worse than rage. The man let go like her skin had turned to fire. "Hyuk-jin, I didn't know she was," he started, and seemed to think better of finishing. He was gone before Caroline could process an apology that never came. She stood there, pulse loud in her ears, staring at the man who'd just emptied a street with 3 words. "You're shaking," he said, stepping closer. Not touching her, just close enough she felt the warmth off him in the cold. "I'm fine." "You're not." No argument in it, just fact, like he was reading the weather off her face. "Where do you live?" She should have walked away. Instead, she heard herself answer. "Riverside, near campus." He nodded once, like that settled something, and tipped his head toward a black car idling at the curb she hadn't even noticed arrive. "I'll take you." "I don't know you." "No," he agreed, "but you know what almost happened back there, and you know I'm the reason it didn't." His eyes held hers, dark and unhurried, like he already knew she'd get in. Lee Hyuk-jin. The drive took 11 minutes. He didn't fill them with small talk. He asked her name once, said it back to himself, Caroline, like he was weighing the shape of it, then went quiet, one hand loose on the wheel, watching the road like nothing in this city had ever dared touch him. When he pulled up outside her building, he didn't ask for her number. He didn't need to. "I'll see you again," he said, with the certainty of a man who had never once been told no, and didn't intend to start with her. Caroline watched the taillights vanish down the block long after they were gone, and told herself the feeling settling in her chest was only fear. It wasn't. She knew the smell of money. She didn't know, yet, the smell of something that owned people. Vivian heard the car before she saw it. Low engine, idling too long outside their building for a delivery. Too quiet for a cab. She pulled the curtain back an inch and watched her sister climb out of a black sedan like she was stepping off a cloud, cheeks flushed, eyes somewhere far away. "Who was that?" Vivian said, not a question, when Caroline came through the door still wearing that look. "Nobody, just someone who helped me." Caroline set her bag down too carefully, the way she did when she was hiding something even from herself. "Helped you with what?" The story came out in pieces over the next 10 minutes, and Vivian's stomach tightened with every one of them. A man who emptied a street with 3 words. A man whose name made another grown man apologize and run. A man who didn't ask for a number because he didn't need to. "Caroline?" Vivian kept her voice even, the way she'd learned to in rooms full of her father's donors. "That's not a guardian angel. That's a man who collects people. You weren't there. I don't need to be." She'd grown up watching men like that orbit her father at fundraisers, the ones who never raised their voice because they'd never had to. who smiled at senators like they were doing them a favor by showing up. She knew the shape of that power, even when it wore a different face. She got her answer 4 days later, on the steps outside Caroline's lecture hall, when she went to walk her sister home and found him already there. He was leaning against the railing like he'd been carved into the architecture. Dark coat, unbothered by the cold, watching the doors with the patience of a man who had nowhere else he needed to be. When Caroline appeared, he didn't smile, didn't wave, just straightened slightly, like her presence had pulled something taut in him. "You didn't tell me you had a sister," he said, when his eyes finally found Vivian. "Because I didn't think it mattered." Vivian stepped between them without quite meaning to. "Lee Hyuk-jin. You know my name." "I know what your name does to people on the street." She held his gaze, refusing to be the one who looked away first. "I'd like to know what you actually want with my sister." Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not even surprise. Closer to interest, like he'd been handed a harder question than he expected and didn't mind it. "I want to make sure nothing like 4 nights ago happens to her again." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, eyes moving back to Caroline for half a second too long before returning to Vivian. "It isn't." He left it there, unfinished, and walked off down the steps without another word, leaving Vivian standing in the cold with the unsettling certainty that she'd just met someone who didn't lose conversations. She just didn't yet understand that he hadn't come for one sister at all. The fight wasn't about him. It just felt that way, the second his name came up. It started small, Caroline mentioning, too casually, that Hyuk-jin had sent a car to pick her up from the library. Vivian's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "He did what?" "It's not a big deal. I had a ton of books. It was raining." "It wasn't raining, Caroline. I checked the weather an hour ago." Vivian set the fork down. "Why does he have your number?" Caroline's silence answered before she did. "He asked. I gave it to him." "After I told you what he is?" "You told me what you think he is. You met him for 90 seconds on a staircase." The apartment went quiet in the particular way it did when both of them were too proud to back down. Vivian turned back to her plate, jaw tight, telling herself this was about safety, about their father's career, about every reasonable thing, and almost believing it. She didn't expect to see him again so soon, but 3 nights later, leaving a study group near the law library, she found him waiting by the entrance, the way he'd waited on those steps, like the architecture had simply produced him. "You're not Caroline," she said, stopping a few feet away. "No." His eyes moved over her, unhurried, the same way they'd moved over her sister, and something in Vivian's chest went tight and confused at once. "I came to see you." "Why?" "Because I find I keep thinking about the sister who didn't trust me." He said it plainly, no charm in it, like he was reporting a fact he didn't fully understand himself. "That's unusual for me." "I don't want your attention." "I didn't ask whether you wanted it." The words should have made her angrier. Instead, they landed somewhere lower, somewhere she didn't have a ready defense for, and she hated him a little for finding it so easily. She told Caroline none of it that night, told herself it didn't matter, that it had been one strange conversation in the cold and nothing more. But 3 days after that, Caroline found a single white peony on the kitchen counter with no note, and 3 days after that, Vivian found an identical one outside her own bedroom door. Neither of them said anything until Caroline finally held hers up at dinner, voice tight. "Did he give you one too?" Vivian didn't bother lying. Yes. So he's... Caroline's voice cracked slightly, somewhere between disbelief and something rawer. Both of us. He's doing this to both of us. I didn't ask for it. Neither did I, but you didn't exactly throw yours out, did you? The silence after that was worse than the fight 3 nights earlier, heavier, because underneath the anger was a question neither of them wanted to say out loud, that they'd both, separately, in their own rooms, stood holding a single white flower and felt the same unwanted warmth spread through their chest. 2 sisters, 1 man, and neither of them yet willing to admit they didn't want him to choose. He'd never once raised his voice to get what he wanted. He didn't need to start with the man who put his hands on Caroline. Vivian found out about it the way she found out about everything that mattered. Secondhand, and 3 days too late. A classmate mentioned, in passing, that a man named Marcus had been pulled out of his apartment lease without warning, lost his internship the same week, and left the city entirely. The same Marcus who'd cornered Caroline outside a party 2 weeks earlier and gripped her arm hard enough to bruise. Caroline had never told Vivian who it was. She'd barely told Vivian it happened at all. "You knew about this," Vivian said, finding Hyuk-jin outside the building that evening, not bothering with a greeting. "You knew, and you didn't say a word to either of us." "I handled it." "That's not your job." "It is now." He said it without heat, without apology, the same unhurried certainty he brought to everything. Nobody touches either of you and walks away from it like nothing happened. That's not a conversation I'm interested in having twice. "Either of us." Vivian's voice sharpened. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide you're responsible for both of us like we're something you're allowed to claim." "I'm not asking permission, Vivian." The use of her name, low and certain, stopped her short more than anything else he'd said. "You can't have us both," she said, quieter now, and hated how much it cost her to say it out loud. Hated more that some part of her wasn't sure she meant it as the warning it was supposed to be. "Why not?" He stepped closer, not crowding her, just close enough that she had to tilt her head to hold his gaze. "I haven't pretended otherwise. Not to you, not to her." "Because it isn't normal." "Neither is what I felt the first time I saw your sister on that street, or what I felt on those steps, arguing with you." His voice didn't rise, didn't soften, just stayed level, like he was laying out a case he'd already won. "I'm not going to apologize for wanting both of you. I'm only going to tell you the truth, which is more than most men manage." Vivian had no answer for that. She turned and went upstairs instead, and found Caroline sitting on her bed already, eyes red, a folded news clipping about Marcus's sudden disappearance from campus in her hand. "He did this for me," Caroline said quietly, "without telling either of us." "I know." "I'm scared of how much I don't mind that he did." Vivian sat beside her sister, the anger from downstairs draining into something closer to recognition. "I'm scared of the same thing." For the first time since the white peonies appeared on their counter, neither sister filled the silence with blame. They just sat with it. 2 daughters of the same parents, falling for the same impossible man, finally too tired to keep pretending it could be stopped. The fight that finally broke them open wasn't with him. It was with each other. And it ended with both of them saying the one thing neither had dared admit out loud. It started over nothing. A borrowed sweater, a missed text, Some small domestic spark that had nothing to do with Hyuk-jin and everything to do with 2 weeks of unspoken tension finally finding a crack to escape through. "You've been different with me," Vivian said, arms crossed, standing in the doorway of Caroline's room. "Ever since he started—" "Don't." Caroline's voice cracked. "Don't make this about him again." "It's always about him, Caroline. We just keep pretending it isn't." "What do you want me to say? That I think about him? That I hate how much I think about him, knowing you do too?" Caroline stood, finally letting it out, eyes wet. "I love you. I've loved you my whole life, longer than I've known him. And I am so scared that wanting the same man as you is going to take that away from me." The room went still. Vivian's anger emptied out of her all at once, replaced by something rawer. "I'm scared of that too," Vivian admitted, voice breaking. "I keep trying to be angry at him because it's easier than being angry at the truth, which is that I don't want to compete with you. I never wanted that. I just didn't know what else to do with how I feel." "So what do we do?" "I don't know. But I know I'd rather share something with you than lose you over it." Caroline crossed the room and pulled her sister into a hug that held 4 years of competition, comparison, and quiet love underneath it all. And for the first time in weeks, neither of them felt like the other was an obstacle. Hyuk-jin arrived an hour later, summoned by a single text from Vivian. "We need to talk to you. Together." He found them sitting side by side on the couch, hands linked, the kind of united front that told him everything before either spoke a word. "We're not going to fight each other over you anymore," Caroline said first, steadier than she'd sounded all week. "We talked." Vivian held his gaze, unflinching now. "And if this is something you actually want, both of us, equally, no hierarchy, no secrets between the 3 of us, then we're willing to try." "But you don't get to choose one of us later," Caroline added. "You don't get to decide somewhere down the line that this was temporary. We need to hear that from you now." Hyuk-jin sat across from them, studying both faces for a long moment, and for the first time since Caroline had met him, something in his composure actually softened. "I told Vivian on those steps I wasn't going to apologize for wanting both of you." He looked between them, voice quiet but absolute. "I'm telling you both now. There's no version of this where I choose. There never was. You're not competing for something. You already have it. Both of you." Caroline let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. Vivian, for the first time, let herself smile instead of guard against it. The truth, finally spoken by all 3, settled over the room like something solid enough to build on. The morning didn't feel like the start of a secret. It felt like the start of an ordinary life, which was the strangest, most welcome thing of all. 3 months had passed since that night on the couch, and the apartment on Riverside had quietly become something closer to a home for 3 than 2. Hyuk-jin's coat now hung by the door without anyone questioning it. His coffee order sat written in Vivian's handwriting on the fridge, because she was the only one who could ever get it right. Caroline sat curled into his side on the Sunday morning, sunlight cutting through the kitchen window, while Vivian moved around them making breakfast like she'd done it 100 times, because by now she had. There was no tension left in the room, no competition humming underneath the quiet, just the easy rhythm of 3 people who'd stopped pretending they wanted anything less than this. "My father wants to meet you," Vivian said, sliding a plate across the counter without looking up. "Officially, not as a friend of the family." "I know." Hyuk-jin's arm stayed loose around Caroline's shoulders, unbothered. "I already accepted the dinner invitation." Caroline sat up slightly. "You talked to our father without telling us?" I told him exactly what this is. He said it simply, the same unshaken certainty he'd carried since the night on West 4th Street. Both of you. No version of me hiding what I want, and no version of either of you hiding what you've chosen. If your father has a problem with that, he can have it with me directly. Vivian set the last plate down and finally let herself laugh. A real one, not guarded, not bracing for an argument that wasn't coming. He's going to need a moment. He'll have it. I'm not going anywhere. That evening, the senator did need a moment. More than one, in fact. Sitting across from the man his daughters had chosen to share rather than fight over. But Hyuk-jin answered every question without flinching, without performing, and by the time dinner ended, even a man who'd spent 30 years reading people for a living couldn't find a single thread of doubt to pull at. Later that night, back on Riverside, the three of them sat together on the same couch where it had all been said out loud for the first time. No more peonies left without notes. No more secrets between bedroom doors. No more sisters measuring their worth against each other. Just Caroline's head resting on his shoulder, and Vivian's hand finding his on the cushion between them, and the quiet certainty, settled now in all three of them, that nothing about this was temporary. No part 2, Vivian murmured, half a tease, watching the city lights through the window. No, Hyuk-jin said simply, pulling both sisters closer. This is the part that lasts. And for the first time since a black car had pulled up outside a darkened side street months ago, none of them needed to wonder what came next. It had already arrived, and it was staying.